welcome. I hope all is well there in Kiev.
Yeah, it's actually getting relatively warm. So the extreme colds are gone, and the situation is better. We have more light than we had before because when it was cold, the light was going down most of the time. So, which was very inconvenient, I would say.
Yes, I can only imagine, and it's a pretty amazing how well you and all your fellows Ukrainians coped with this. I want to talk about the Congress and get some updates from you. Before we do, though, I've been noticing, particularly on Twitter, that there seems to be some real momentum in terms of other nations coming forward with even more weapons, even more advanced weapons in advance of tomorrow's meeting in Ramstein. I don't know if I'm saying Ramstein right or not, but could you talk
Ramstein,
about
Ramstein. It's
Ramstein?
German,
Thank
right?
you. Yeah,
Ramstein.
Ramstein. Can you talk about what you know about that event and why you think we're seeing so much activity in advance of the event?
No, it's. I wouldn't say that it's kind of a turning point, but in general, there is such a feeling that it's almost there. Because just a month ago, most of Western nations were not talking about providing assault equipment. They were talking about only the defensive equipment. And that's obviously the result of the recent actions that Mr. Putin had undertaken with the bombing of Ukrainian cities during the Christmas and New Year holidays, and the recent events in Dnipro with the residential building. Which was very visible. And yeah, looks like the dam is about to burst. And at the end of the day, everybody understands that those weapons, they are needed. Just nobody wants to be the first. And here is the psychological question: when certain nations start to deliver, and that's why surprisingly very important role was played by France when President Macron announced that he would deliver, okay, lightweight tanks, but nevertheless tanks to Ukraine. And if you notice, immediately the very next day, Poles announced that they are to give 14 Leopard to heavyweight tanks to Ukraine. And that again, that shows this domino effect which is happening. And actually, yesterday it was very funny thing at World Economic Forum, where it was actually our guy from our channel, February's Morning, Утро Февраля, who asked Chancellor Scholz question. So what the hell when you are going to deliver tanks to Ukraine? And Scholz was flip-flopping for like 5 minutes, talking how great Germany is and what important role Germany is playing, and that is a large donor for Ukraine, but never said a single word about the tanks. And then he was pressured more, and then looks like he got an idea which kind of could backfire in a very curious way, because Scholz in the evening of that day said that okay, Germany would deliver Leopards if Americans would deliver Abrams. And I think that right now this thing is really on the table, and now Americans can deliver Abrams, and, and that actually may happen.
Yeah, well, my next question was going to be about Germany. Do you want to predict an outcome here? What do you think is going to happen?
As you saw, they just changed their Minister of Defense.
Yes.
Actually, the new guy was sworn just, I believe, an hour ago, something like this. So definitely what's happening today. and he's a capable guy. He's more decisive than his predecessor. But still, I think that the problem is with Scholz himself. In general, more with the position of social democrats. They usually were traditionally the party which was the most affiliated with Russia. And we understand that, for example, Chancellor Schroeder, who is the chairman of Nord Stream, he also was coming from social democrats. He was a counselor from social democrats, and his influence there was still pretty significant. So that's a general position of the party, but it's moving like everything in Germany very slowly, but very orderly and steadily in the direction to help Ukraine more in the military sense.
So I want to get an update from you on the Congress. We have some new people here, so I just want to explain really quickly that this is a Congress that has been formed by deputies of previously elected officials in Russia. The first meeting was held in Warsaw in November. You're meeting again at the end of this month, correct? Or early February. And what the Congress is doing is forming a new government for Russia. So a new constitution has been written. Other laws are being written. A big part of what the Congress is doing is now reaching out to other governments to work with them to get recognized by them. And I'm wondering, you just used the frame. It feels like there's a turning point in terms of the meeting tomorrow. It also feels like there's a turning point with the EU. Just a few hours ago, there was a vote to have a special tribunal for Putin. I'm
Right.
assuming that all of this momentum on other fronts is also very, very useful for you in terms of the work you're doing with the Congress, particularly in your relationships with other countries.
No, that is correct, and we are to have a large event in European Parliament at the end of the month also, and yes, we are gradually building these relationships and connections with different international governments and parliaments. That's a work in progress, which is happening right now. But indeed, yes, I still think that it's one of the key prerequisites to change Vladimir Putin is to construct a political alternative. And it's like it's a snowball process. It's the same as with delivering weapons. So it starts small, and some people tend to ridicule it when it's at the beginning. But then it's growing larger, larger, and larger, and we already see some people which were very skeptical to what we were doing at the beginning starting to join us, and so it's growing. And again, we are talking about serious things about the new legislation for New Russia. And later, you were absolutely correct about creating first the shadow, then the real government of Russia. Just again, it takes time, but it's moving exactly in that direction.
Yeah, and if nobody does it and takes it on in that early stage where you get no support or maybe you're even ridiculed, then it never gets done. Someone has to make that investment in the beginning and be the one who tilts windmills. Sometimes those tilted windmills change the world.
No, absolutely, and I think that's the key thing which needs to be done. It needs to be this armed resistance that needs to be nurtured and supported and making grow. And our Legion Free Russia is doing very well, and it's also getting recognized. Again, the skepticism is vanishing in front of our eyes, which was there definitely because people did not understand originally how come Russians are fighting alongside with Ukrainians against Putin's army, that could never happen. Now they see it's real, and that's very important for us. But also again, in the opposition, they understand. So this is the real project. It's not about talking. It's not about media. It's about real stuff. It's about how Russia would actually look like tomorrow. And actually, today was very funny. Also, just to mention it because it happened in the United States. There is a small scandal in social networks because people recognized it was Navalny's ad on Times Square in New York. So it was one of these large electronic billboards was with the slogan "Free Navalny." And you know, from one side, I'm extremely glad that you know this message is getting across. From the other side, you know, people started to calculate how much money has been spent on this.
The ad cost.
Yes, the ad cost, and for whom, you know, so on Times Square. So it's, it's just, you know, showing off. And that's it. Instead of spending money on the revolutionary process in Russia, which can actually liberate Navalny, we have difficult relations with him personally, but nevertheless, my activity is directly targeted on letting him free from the jail, and he would be the first person to be released after the revolution, no doubt. And so that's what we need to work on. And again, such scandals help us because, you know, people start realizing that, okay, so we better join forces with those people who are about action and not talking.
Yes, yes. All right, we may come back to the Congress before I let you go today, but I want to actually build on what we've been talking about here to segue to something you posted on Facebook a few hours ago. And by the way, before I go there, all of these things we're talking about, it's so interesting for me to listen to you talk about the Congress and these other movements towards an alternative government for Russia, because I helped you take a book you wrote in Russia and turn it in Russian and turn it into a book in English. And so I want to point out, you know, if the things Ilya's talking about are of interest to you, go to Amazon and buy the book, Does Putin Have to Die? Because this is exactly what the book is about. And if you really want to have insight into what's going on, a deeper historical understanding, it's all there. So I really do encourage you to do that. I want to talk
and
about.
by the way, guys who understand Russian, on my YouTube channel, I started publishing a Russian version in the video format when I am just reading the book in public. So those who understand Russian, welcome to the YouTube stream. It's happening every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
And this is the original book that you had written that then was edited as a collaboration between the two of us for this English version book. And the title of that, excuse me, I'm congested. The title of the book you're now reading is The Red Book.
Yes.
Where does that title come from?
Actually, that's kind of maybe a tradition of certain like revolutionary books, which usually were labeled in different colors. And my original idea was to call it a white book because the movement which we had in Bolotnaya movement was labeled as white ribbon movement. But still, my political views are rather on the left side, and white is the color of surrender. So we thought it over and decided, so let's call it, you know, with something more aggressive, more energetic, and something. And also, I don't know actually how it's been in the West. In Russian, there is such an idiom because in our tradition, all the rare species, are about being extinguished from the face of Earth.
Yeah.
They are being put in the book which is called the Red Book.
Interesting.
So that's also, an allusion to that. So, it's something which was almost extinct, and which we need to protect, to preserve, and make grow.
But we're okay if Putin becomes extinct.
Yeah.
Okay. So, by the way, Lily, the answer to your question is the link I just put in the chat. The Red Book in Russian, those videos are on the same channel where we will be doing this show starting next week, correct? All right.
Yep.
So you put something on YouTube about 4 hours ago. It was a transcript in English of an interview. I think it was an interview you did with Mark Feigen. And it addressed a question I was going to ask you about today anyway. It's something I hear from people in the West every day. They'll say to me, look at those Russians. Look at how they respond to the invasion of Ukraine. They don't care. They want a leader like Putin. They want a strong-arm leader. They want to be bossed around. And you and Feigen had a conversation, I think, about that, which was translated into English. I really want you to explain who Mark Feigen is, and then help us understand how it's possible that the Russian people can become part of a democratic government, and if this idea that they really want to be, lorded over by a strong-armed dictator, is that true? And if it's true, how do you transform them into a people who want to be free?
So to say a few words about Mark. Mark was former vice mayor of Samara. It's one of the largest cities in Russia on Volga River. And then he was member of Russian Parliament, of State Duma, and then he turned out to be a human rights defender, a lawyer. He, as a lawyer, was protecting a lot of high-profile cases in the courts. Was the lawyer, for example, for Pussy Riot case, which is probably his most famous case. Then he was also forced into exile. Right now lives in France. And since the beginning of this war, he has a daily show with Alexei Arestovich, speaking about what's happening in Ukraine in the field of war, which is probably the most popular YouTube show in Ukraine, and also very much watched in Russia. So he's currently one of the most watched Russian YouTube bloggers. And also he is a co-founder of the Congress of People's Deputies and member of the Executive Council of Congress of People's Deputies. So he's a well-known figure. And yes, we had a public discussion with him on this Russian character and what's needed, etc., etc. And there are, I would say, it's like three possible takes on how the future leaders of Russia should be positioned within the country. And it's very about mentality. It's, in different countries, it's very different. Say, Scandinavian approach is that people like when the person is driving a bicycle, drives in metro and walks the streets, etc. For example, the very same approach in the very same Europe, in France, would not be accepted as something normal because, a leader has to be respected somehow. It doesn't mean that he needs to be a dictator or whatever, but he needs to be respected. In Russia, the tradition that the leader is a sort of a sacred figure. And that's a tradition which goes to the times of Byzantine Empire, when the leader was semi-god. And that's that's the tradition which very much continues in Russia. So the subject of the discussion with Fagin was what should we do about this? And my approach is that we should give Russians a lot of taste for power at the very low municipal level, when they need to feel it in their mouth, that they actually can decide things about what's going on around them. And Mark was saying that firstly, people need to be led by force in a certain direction, but in a proper direction, in the direction of democracy and freedom and whatever. I personally don't believe in the reforms that are being done by force. I am believing in staging the conditions when people would start demand something, and then offering them what they demand, because they in general they don't know what they demand. No, they never know. They just have some vague understandings, of movement somewhere. But then it's the job of the politician to actually make this proposition and put this proposition in front of them and make them feel, okay, that's what we wanted. So that would be our job for sure. But I don't think that we need to do it by force. But nevertheless, both approaches, one or another, assumes that the transition period would not be democratic. Like the transition period after World War II in Germany was not democratic. They, for 4 years, they had a very undemocratic government, which was just appointed, installed on them by the occupants. But it was the transition to democracy, and that was the subject of our discussion.
I'm going to ask a question about the past in Russia. And this may be a case where I show my naivete as a Westerner, but as you were describing this mindset of Russians over time, you used the word semi-god. Could it be that one of the reasons the reforms of the Yeltsin and Gorbachev era didn't take into account this sort of Russian mindset? Was there too much freedom too fast?
With Gorbachev, yes. With Yeltsin, no. Mm-hmm. I mean, as Gorbachev started his reforms, basically it was a very similar situation like it was in China. And to my mind, if Gorbachev would have chosen the approach similar to the approach of Deng Xiaoping in China, the results would have been way much better. And in general, again, being leftist, I always think that you should start reforming the economy, the foundation, the basis, and then reform the politics, which is built on top of the this economic basis. If you start reforming the basis in a more free way, it would require the political construction to become more democratic. But in this situation, the country would not have collapsed. But when Yeltsin was coming to power, he already was coming to power as a Tsar, just as a nice Tsar, which tolerated people saying about him bad words in the media. But nevertheless, the Tsar, and he always had the capability, and he created the system that if somebody would cross the red line, he would be squashed immediately. And Putin just had a lower tolerance, lower red line in a different place. But the nature, it was absolutely the same. So Yeltsin restored the monarchy in the country. It was not Putin who was the usurper. It was Yeltsin.
All right. So I want to go back to what you said about Russia having a tradition of a leader as a semi-god. Does Putin think he's a semi-god?
Definitely. I am not sure about semi, but definitely in that direction.
And of course, when you present yourself that way and you have all the power, particularly in a system that is a tradition, people fall in line and treat you that way. I would guess.
Yeah, I will be satisfied with the position of superhuman. It's okay.
We have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything you want to add in terms of us, in terms of updating us on the progress of the Congress?
No, I think it will actually this coming week would be very important because we have face-to-face meetings of the working groups, which are drafting the particular pieces of legislation, the free media and the constitution and the amnesty and illustration. And then in February, we will already have certain drafts published before they would be introduced and heard on the floor of the Congress. But I wanted to use these 2 remaining minutes just to express my hopes that we all will meet on the good old YouTube, on the new platform, that we will not disappear from each other. We have a great community here, which we built in the duration of almost a year. And I hope it would be preserved. I love you guys. I hope you like me a little bit, but you're still coming here. So let's continue.
All right. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to keep chatting for a few minutes, and I will share the YouTube link again. Ilya, thanks for being here. We'll see you next week. And let's see. I don't know if I let you go or you let you go, but I am going to set you free so you can move on to your next thing. There we go. Let's see how that works. Thank you again.
Free forever. Yes. Thank you very much, guys.